Hello, everyone. So good to be here with the Institute for Aliveness during our very sacred solstice. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, we are welcoming in the winter. And if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, welcoming in the summer. But I, in my heart, am welcoming you to this beautiful moment and just want to encourage us all to drop in to the place where we are right now. If there's any need to go to the bathroom or get some water or light some incense or do a stretch, now is the perfect moment. If you've been at your computer for a while, I do encourage you to stand up, shake it out, and we'll be welcoming ourselves more deeply into a conversation about inner and outer architecture after we take some time for our bodies. I'm going to stretch. If you want to stretch with me, you can lift the arms up. And maybe take a big sigh. And I'm going to do some lateral stretches. So if you want to just lean to one side and feel the sides of your body, it's so easy to forget those. And if you're still considering getting up from your computer, I'm going to give at least 2 more minutes. You've got time. While we're getting settled, I just want to invite us into a practice of orienting. And this is about finding the here and now. And so I'm orienting to the screen. I can see you all in gallery view, and I'm looking at the chat window, excited about what kind of stream of consciousness we can create together. You might try experimenting with the boundaries of your screen, considering if you want to be on camera or not for this session. I would love to see your faces, of course. And then checking in with what's outside of your screen. Jamie, to see everyone, you'll just go, are you on a phone or a computer? While you answer, I'll just invite all of us to look around the space outside of our screen. See if maybe there's some nature that you can connect with. I can see trees outside my window. Jamie's on a laptop. If you're on a laptop, you just move to the upper right-hand corner of your screen. If you move the mouse up there, there'll be a button that says View. Tap it, and then you want Gallery View. And this is a really fun way to connect with all the beautiful souls that are joining us to celebrate creativity at this potent portal. Love to see the faces. Hello, Daniela, Melissa, Car, Irena, Rhiannon, Steven is on camera. You want to come on camera and give a wave, join the community. This will be a fun way to feel connected. So the reason, hey Cassie, we are checking in with nature is because today I want to connect with a sense of regenerativity, how we can be regenerated by our connection to the world, specifically the natural world, and how we can do that through our bodies. And we can create a practice of regenerating ourselves through the world around us. Many times the world around us is very degenerative. If you have a job that makes you feel a little bit dead inside, you'll be familiar with that. But I'll be sharing more deeply about all of this in just a moment. We are still arriving and grounding. I would love to know where you are all calling in from in the world. Go ahead and in the chat, drop the name of the place where you currently are sitting, standing, lying, dancing, walking, whatever it is. Let us know. Daniela is close to Rio, Brazil. Car is in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Talis is in Vancouver Island. Joy is in Central Virginia, United States. I'm in Costa Rica on the Caribbean coast in Puerto Viejo. Steven's on Chumash Mountain in British Columbia. Jamie's in Nyack, New York. Jeet is in Magyala, India. Irena is in New York City. Thank you for naming the indigenous stewards of your land, Irena, and that's such a powerful practice. Rhiannon is calling in from Australia. Wow, we have so many continents. This feels incredible. Yes, and hello to you, Roxy. Look at all these amazing humans all over the world, she says. Yes, it is truly magnificent that we are here at this potent portal. And I'll just introduce myself a little bit as we get started here. So I'm a visionary architect, and when I was in school, we talked about how architecture is the mother of all arts. And that's really relevant since we are at this festival of creativity and there's so many beautiful artists speaking. We had Melissa today, my friend Mariette spoke this morning as well. We'll have Stephen later and Roxy just after this session as well. And so many more genius, legendary creators who are exploring the blooming edge of what art actually is. But architecture is considered the mother of the arts because it gave us sacred space within which to slow down, settle down, and create. So I'm also a dancer and a writer, a yogi and a meditator. And I find the practice of presence to be so transformational. And so I want to share that with you as something that you can bring into your creative practice. So that's one of the things you can expect from this hour-long session. When I studied architecture, I became fascinated by cities and the way that they could be better. I was studying in Philadelphia, and it's known as the city of brotherly love, but you're much more likely to encounter crime than love in that city. And so I felt like there was this opportunity for cities to become more like an urban ecosystem, a place where we could encounter diversity, could come alive with our creative life force energy. And so I studied something called geodesign. And geodesign is the combination of geography and design. Geography is a funny word. It talks about geo, which is the planet, graphy. So we're graphing the planet. And something about that practice really touched me from all my years as a yogi and a meditator. And I began to think about the landscape of the body as this other opportunity for design. And as I got deeper into the body as a landscape and started to move through the world using my senses to sense the space around me and within me, I became aware that that other landscape of the body is actually the only landscape. It's the first landscape. It's the first territory of the planet. And I started to resonate with this Gaia hypothesis, this idea that we're part of one living being that is this multifaceted, diverse, extraordinarily complex entity and part of this planetary body. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. That's the vision I want to activate in you. And if you're here celebrating the solstice with the Institute for Aliveness, you might already be pretty edgy in terms of your consciousness and awareness values. You might be thinking about things like the new earth and rainbow warriors and your light body, and be aware that we're in this transition period as a species where we're moving from this technological Anthropocene crisis of climate change and all of that to a new paradigm where we're joining ancient wisdom and new technology to create a new humanity, which the sages and ancestors have prophesied for generations. Yes, Kar, the turning of the ages. There's so many different indigenous legends and tales and stories that help us to orient at this moment of what is truly a meta crisis. There are so many problems that are multi-layered, and we're facing them all. And we're challenged really by this difficult separation, this polarization that we witness at every level of society, where we are even separating humans and nature. And so I hope that as we explore our inner architecture and its connection to outer architecture, we can start to repair this separation that we experience at a very deep level. And you have probably already started in your own practices. So I'll be inviting you to share what that's like for you too. So thank you for being here. We're going to be deepening into quantum alchemy and unity consciousness. So put your unity consciousness goggles on and your quantum alchemist cap, and let's dive in. So I want to offer a couple words about degenerative systems. Go ahead if you're feeling inspired and drop in the chat, what are some of the systems of oppression that we are naming that we would like to transmute? So we'll look at the chat as a cauldron right now that we can place energetically into these things that we want to transform at a global scale. So these are oppressive and extractive systems like fossil fuel extraction, capitalism, land ownership. Yes, Cassie is resonating capitalism. And Stephen is resonating legal structures, right? Like the idea that we can own land is such a fallacy. The land has a spirit. And so let us place this concept into our collective cauldron. Kara is naming agriculture. Let us name the oppression of agriculture that is using toxic chemicals instead of permaculture, which brings this holistic idea of humans and nature working together. And we can also name oppressive governance systems. What we're witnessing in Iran, for example, is really this climax of the idea that humans can be objects which are used and manipulated for power. And we can name all kinds of different slavery paradigms that are still existing in our human consciousness. So this degenerative stew of energy we've now placed into the cauldron of our collective awareness. And so we're, as Tala says, healing our animal territorial instincts through conscious evolution. Yes. Yeah. Egoism. Thank you, Raina. Yeah. It's such a potent moment when we can look at all of these things. The power of our collective awareness is transformational. So that's our word about degeneration. Now let's talk a little bit about regeneration, or a lot of it about it. We'll be there for the rest of the session. So thanks for your patience as we touch down into the really deep stuff. Nature naturally regenerates. Nature doesn't say, oh, that's ugly, I'm not going to go there. In fact, nature loves compost. Nature loves it when there are all of these yucky, mucky places of dark, deep, gross by our human definition, nutrients. That is the stuff of creation. So how do we as humans return to what nature does naturally? And I believe that our soul is the guide in this process. Our soul is everything. The soul connects us to all that is. And so when we're talking about inner architecture, the soul becomes the inner architect. And we're talking about unifying polarities, this non-duality where body and mind are not separate. We're healing their connection, where the darkness and the light are not separate. We know that the darkness gives birth to the light, and the light and the dark are one. And we have in alchemy this ancient adage that says, as above, so below. And what that means is that what we have, and then as below, so above, what we have is an inherent reciprocity with what's around us and what's within us. And when you start to move through the world in this way, there's this incredible power that comes to you. So the thesis for this session is that sacred architecture is a healing art. Sacred architecture is a healing art, which can connect us to the earth. It can connect us to our true selves, and it can connect us to each other. So this is in contrast to buildings, which are a commodity, something to be built and then sold, land to be bought and sold, spaces that are developed in order to be rented just for the sake of commerce. This is the influence of capitalism. When we build architecture with intention, with consciousness, with awareness and presence, then we're healing not just ourselves, not just each other, but also the earth by giving reverence to the use of natural materials. So you might be thinking, I'm not an architect. How can I practice this? And that's totally valid. But I want to encourage you to consider that the community you live in, the space around your home, the streets that you move through, the spaces around the school you go to or the office building where you work, those are your spaces in some way. And even if you cannot physically contribute to discussions about how to develop your neighborhood or what's happening at town hall, how they're going to be building that multiplex over there or the strip mall over there, even if you don't have access to those kinds of conversations, the energy that you move through the world with is already constructing the world around you. So there's the incentive to carry on deepening here. So I want to bring us now to focus on our outer architecture, because that's the thing that makes the most sense. Like the building that you're in right now, let's each take a moment to pause and look around the building that we're in. Or if you're outside, amazing, look at the nearest building. And if you can't find one, perfect. But what is your space telling you? Drop a couple words in the chat. What is your space telling you? The shape of it, the walls, the roof, the windows and doors, the overall geometry, the materials, their story. What is your space telling you? The physical building. Like you might have some amazing decorations inside, but see if you can look beyond that and write some words in the chat. Cassie is feeling rectangular from her space, and that is so common. I would love to know if anybody is in a space that's not rectangular. Joy is feeling held. The space is holding her. Michelle feels beauty. I love that. I'm so glad. Aquarium, says Jamie. That's very interesting. Is it raining where you are? Car says minimalist, nature resort themed, family oriented. Very nice. Stephen says the glass is a thin membrane between the -13 Celsius snow-covered landscape just beyond. Wow. Yeah, I can feel the separation and the awareness there. A thin membrane. Callus says lucky, close by, and warm. Jeet feels a safe space. Michelle is in a new chalet type home with cathedral ceiling and huge windows into the woods. Melissa feels transient, visitor, and grateful. Arena says value of preservation, memory in the trees, appreciation of materials. Wonderful. So there's lot of positive energy in this room, and I think that's a testament to the way that our inner state can overcome the outer state, because it's likely that most of us are in, like Cassie said, rectangular spaces full of concrete and cement, and we might have some wood accents. There's probably plastic. I'm under a plastic ceiling right now, and I can see another plastic roof outside. There's one operable window in my space. This is not my home. I'm traveling. And there's no decoration on the walls. It's just white. And there are 4 corners that feel like a box. So in our society, we try to think outside the box when we're in our creative process. That's the idea, is that to innovate, you want to think outside the box. But we live inside of boxes. If you have a cathedral ceiling, that's an amazing energetic asset, because it lifts up the corners and creates a triangulation, which is one of the most sacred geometries. The tetrahedron actually activates our consciousness into a kind of resonance, which moves the energetics. The thing about a cube is it's so stable and so solid that the energetics of our human form don't resonate. They are densified. And so we get densified habitual patterns. And this relates to things like obesity and a sedentary lifestyle where we just get stuck. We might get stuck emotionally. We might feel stuck creatively. And so there's another question that I have for you. And how does your space speak to life? How does the physical space, the walls, the floor, the ceiling, speak to life? Does it have a relationship to your body? To nature? Maybe your space is located in some kind of context, like a forest. If you're having a hard time answering this question, it might be because your space doesn't speak to life. Joy has a space that sings to the woods around. What a blessing. Thank you for that gorgeous image. I can hear the resonance of your space. Jeet's in a pine forest. I wonder how much your space reminds you, Jeet, that you're in a pine forest. Is it very open? I think I've seen your space before. So the invitation here is to consider that, as Stephen says, the box feels alien to the organic world of the forest around us. Callus says, having a beautiful view is important to me. I have a beautiful view I wake up to out a great big window. Yes, I think that's also important. Michelle says that her cathedral ceiling sings, and that her partner sanded off the whitewash so they can feel and see the actual wood. So this is it. We want to feel the life in our spaces. Spaces that are made of concrete disconnect us from life because we're not able to see the life inside the walls. It feels like an inert, dead, lifeless material most of the time. If it's used in a way that celebrates the essence of the concrete, we get curves. So concrete is actually a liquid. And when it's poured into straight lines, we have to put metal inside of it so that it stays straight. That's not the true nature of the concrete. It wants to curve. It's stronger in curves when you get these undulating waves. Melissa says, structural function, maybe a passageway workroom, temporarily grateful. Yeah, I'm appreciating your gratitude, Melissa. I think that we can all be grateful for the spaces that we have. I'm going to share one image. Okay. Hey, Francis.
Hey.
So, friends. Oh, I heard somebody sharing.
I think you got a good cut off.
Yeah, thank you, sweetheart. This is an image that I want to share with you. So on the screen, you are seeing a human being taking trees, consuming them, and then excreting gray rectangular buildings. And these are the ticky-tacky houses that developers are constantly creating and generating more of in the world. And the real issue here is that in the beginning, architecture was an art, and it gave birth to art and culture. And now it's an industry. It's the industry of architecture, where we are consuming resources as fast as we can to produce homes that are cheap, fast, and feel that way. So we're going to move on from talking about outer architecture in a moment. But the idea that I'd like to propose is that many of us are very lucky to have found spaces which bring us joy, which bring us closer to nature. And that's not the norm. Many people who live in cities are dozens of feet and meters above the ground. They spend all day inside of office buildings, which are air conditioned and don't have access to natural light, fresh air. They are miles and miles away from forests and parks. To get there, they have to get into cars and burn fossil fuels in order to access what is our birthright, nature. So if you're touched by that, you're not alone. Let's take a deep breath together. Maka says that image is wow. Cheats sharing about his space. It's on a slope of the foothill region of the Himalayas. We have local communities co-living in villages, farming and weaving together amongst other craft work. Dreamy, that's beautiful, Cheat. He says, I like to feel that as I'm in this concrete box with amazing visionaries from all over the planet. Yes, we are among the privileged few to be in connection with so many other humans right now. So if you're feeling that, just drop a yes in the chat. Yeah, I see your hand on heart, Car. Thank you. Drop a yes in the chat and see all the other people resonating the brilliance of this moment. And it's the solstice, which is in the Northern Hemisphere, as I mentioned, a time of the return of the light. So over the last several months in the Northern Hemisphere, our days have been getting shorter and shorter. The light has been lessened and lessened and lessened, decreasing up until today, up until right now. And so this is a literal turning point for the light. We are literally at a moment at this very precise second where in 6 hours, the balance point of day and night will switch, will flip. And that energetic shift is something that we can harness with our conscious awareness. So that's what we're doing right now. We're sitting in the darkness. We're feeling into these deep pain points of humanity that we collectively share. We may be individually privileged to have a space that sings to the forest and to have the awareness that as we walk on the earth, we are the land. We are connected to the earth. We are not separate from her. And there are so many people who do not realize that. And we're still there, the people who are in power. They're at the United Nations making decisions about how to rule and govern our society. And so the reason that we want to be thinking about these issues, this darkness, is that it can teach us who we are. There's a song that goes, "So let the darkness teach you your own name. So in the shadows, you can stand and say, I am God." We are God. We are creating this world together. And so that is what you're practicing when it comes to inner architecture, which is what we're going to turn our attention to now. So I use the word God, and years ago, I would not have been able to say that because I had such a deep wound around spirit. I had a childhood which included spiritual abuse, and it was very traumatic. And it took me years to regain my connection to spirit. And that's something that I love to help clients with one-on-one. I'm an ensoulment coach. And what the practice of ensoulment, the process includes, is coming back into alignment with our freedom to exist, our divinity that's inherent, our natural right to exist as we are in the here and now, without apologies, without exception. And so this is actually a piece of the inner architecture that allows us to become the radiant creators of this world. When we surrender, when we place our will and life in the care of a cosmic creator or a benevolent cosmos or the universe or energy, we are free to create. And don't believe me until you found it to be true for yourself. I am not trying to preach or share any dogma. The word God is actually pre-Christian. Before Christianity, it was a Germanic word that meant the highest good of radiating energy. So there's this shift where we're moving beyond the mundane 3D reality where we just need to survive. Many of us who are here are creators in this sense. We know that we have a vision that's meant to be shared with humanity. And there's this shift into a 5D reality where there's 5 dimensions. And so we have the east and the west and the north and the south, that's 4. And then there's a center point. And from that center point, the 0 point, the center of the toroidal field of the electromagnetic life force, abundance is accessible and it instantly manifests. But when we live in 3D, we have this polarity consciousness where there's good and there's bad. And then there's that in-between balance point. And by dwelling in that balance point between light and dark, good and evil, above and below, inner and outer, by dwelling in that balance point, that non-dual unified awareness, we access this 5D consciousness. So that's the most spiritual I'm going to get in this conversation, but it's an important launching point because we're conditioned through habitual life to exist in this polarized, separatist dialogue. And it's a habit that we need to transcend so that we can relax our survival mechanisms. And that's what spirit helps us do, is to feel adequate, to feel enough, to feel loved and intended. I love what Carr shares here. Interestingly, in our current turning of the ages period, during winter solstice, the sun is positioned at the galactic center. Exactly. The golden gate of God, where soul ascended beyond incarnation to where the inner gods descend. Yeah, the galactic center is actually the entrance into our universe from all the universes around us. In all the cosmos, our galaxy is connected to many other galaxies through this center point. And that's where we stand right now. So we have this power. So spirit is one of the 4 bodies that I want to awaken you to, if you're not already aware of them. And if you're already aware of them, see if you can beat me to describing what they are. First, we have the spiritual body. I know 2 of you in here are already aware of them. And thank you for being here. Then we have the mental body, and that's the one that we're most comfortable with as a modern society. We're really accustomed to being mentalized in our intellectual body. That brings us to the emotional body. The emotional body affects our mental body. Our emotions and our feelings affect how we think. Most of the time, our emotional body is shut down and limited to a select few emotions that we're allowed to experience. And then over here, we have the somatic body, the physical body, which is what we think when we hear body. So we've relegated our whole internal existence to this one physical thing. We think that we're just physical bodies, which isn't true. So this holistic vision of the body helps us to understand inner architecture. We want to, at all 4 levels, be healthy and happy and satisfied and fulfilled, so we can tend to our wellness at these 4 levels. We already talked about the spiritual level. Let's talk about the mental level. When our mind is participating in this mandala of being, we have the freedom to imagine. So in your creative process, this is very valuable. We want to activate the observer or the witness and to change our perception so that we aren't stuck in limitation or lack. Thoughts are things. And so when much of the work that I do comes from the Buddhist tradition, where we're acknowledging that the ego is clinging and grasping onto things outside of itself, and that the world around and outside of us really is an illusion. But that doesn't mean it doesn't matter. We want to accept that we are experiencing the world around us through our mind and through our imagination, which allows us to create new perceptions. Just feeling into that as the second dimension, the spirit and the mind. And now we're going to talk about the heart. The heart gives us the freedom to express tenderness and kindness. And the way we work with the inner architecture of the heart is through the inner child, who has wisdom for us, who has the infinite joy that's always accessible to us when we have had a chance to heal those wounds from childhood, the traumas that we carry, the shame and the guilt and the grief. And we do that through empathy and self-compassion. And so that's another part of this work. We create an architecture of self-compassion, which expands outwards from us. And this is such a powerful thing to do. If you're one of the people who is at the beginning feeling, I'm not an architect, I can't practice healing architecture as an art. This idea of the heart as a body that we can cultivate and care for, I call it the cathedral of compassion. One can actually go within and create a cathedral of compassion inside the heart, which serves as a space for the inner child to play and heal and wail and express themselves, held by inner parents inside the heart, which becomes a safe space. And then we have the power to move through the world with less grasping and holding onto our fears as a way of keeping us safe. So then the last body is the body, the somatic physical experience. And when we're working with the architecture of the body, the soma, we have the freedom to move. And I had a very long journey with chronic pain, over a decade. I spent my entire 20s being unable to walk. And this was because I had an experience with fibromyalgia from growing up with such oppressive emotional constriction that the emotions solidified inside my body and created debilitating tension. And so there was a process where I learned about the nervous system, and I began to understand what it feels like when the sympathetic nervous system is activated versus the parasympathetic nervous system. And I began to learn through a practice of presence how to activate a parasympathetic response. And we can all do that right now together with the breath. So the breath is a magical tool which builds a bridge from the body to the mind. And it's very simple to practice with me. We're just going to breathe in, and then we're going to exhale as long as we can. Ready? Two more like that. If you can feel a cooling happening. You might feel tingles. I notice my body is sort of swaying with its natural rhythm. Yeah, you might feel some tension dripping off your shoulders, your neck. You might notice the alignment of your chin and your head. Thank you all for breathing with me and dropping into your sovereignty. Something that is so important as we are transmuting what we put inside the cauldron, all of those oppressive systems. The way that we do that is by activating our own sovereignty, our own freedom. And so that's what the ensoulment process is about. And this is a process that I've developed to work one-on-one with people to walk the path of the spiritual warrior, the warrior of the heart, the person who has responsibilities and activities and dreams that they want to create and bring into the world, but also wants to experience union, sacred union between their humanness and their divinity. And so this is a process that I have coached people through now for 3 years. And it's been such a joy to witness so many people step into their authentic self, to feel their power, and to experience resilience. So this resilience that you might be feeling, this flexibility and strength, is something that you can offer the world. You get to take this out into the world and change everyone you meet with your centered, authentic power. And it is a practice. It doesn't happen right away. And that's okay. So in doing that, you become an inner architect by consciously taking your spirit, your mind, your heart, and your body into the center of your being, creating this sacred geometry of your wholeness. You can radiate out into the world the kind of place that we want to live, the kind of humanity that we want to become, this connection to the earth. So I'd like to end with a connection to the earth and acknowledge the indigenous peoples of the land where we are individually. If you know their names, put them in the chat, and we'll just take this moment to really bless the elders who have brought this wisdom to us, who have stewarded it for all of these eons, who have kept us connected to the truth of who we are. And let's just honor those ancestors. And while we're at it, we can honor the ancestors of our blood and bones, the ancestors of your mother and father and their lineages. And there are ancestors too of the spirit, the spiritual lineages that we have been blessed to encounter in this lifetime. And so I bless those ancestors too. And we can just acknowledge the vastness of our territory, how the inner world and the outer world are so expansive and wide, and feel the abundance there. So as you drop the names of the ancestors of the land where you are, I think the way, if you don't know, I think that is the website, nativelands.ca, if you need to look up the ancestors of your land to find their names, please do that. Yes, Curtis saying many tribes claim this land over time. It's true, there are no clear boundaries in tribal paradigms, and that's okay. The importance is of the act of reciprocity. The word reciprocity is really central to regeneration, to generativity, is to recognize that we're connected. And when we name one group of indigenous tribes, of one tribe, one group of indigenous people, we're spiritually intending to be in right relationship with the land and with all peoples. And that's the power. It's less important to be right about naming precisely every tribe. And you may know this, and I share it only as a reminder to myself and to us all, because it can be so easy to try and be perfect. So I am currently on the land of the Bree and the Wetar here. And Cassie is on Kado and Osage land. Stephen is on Sumash land. Jeet is naming the Garo, Hejong, Rabha, Kasi, and Jaintia tribes. Roxy names the coastal Miwok. Francis is naming the Mikosuki, Seminole, Tequesta, Taino, and Muskogo. Maka is naming the Henia Kamiare. Joy is naming the Monacan. Courtney names Onidawa, Potawatomi, Anishinaabe. Irina names the Munsee Lenape, which is feeling all the many dimensions of ourselves, our wise and wonderful selves. And now, if there were any questions that came up for you, I'd love if you would raise your hand. All of us who have questions can raise our hands so we know how much time we each have. We can share these final 10 minutes. And as you think of your question, I'd like to share a call to action. And it is reciprocity. It is this acknowledgement of the community of life to which you belong. Who are your neighbors? What do they need? What do they need from you? What can you offer in right relationship to the world around you? And how can you become a better neighbor, a better co-creator of this world? And I would propose that deep listening would be in order. Listening deeply would be the best place to start. You've all done magnificently with that, with me, these last 50 minutes. I really appreciate you. We don't have any hands raised, so if you're considering speaking, now's the time. not, we can just breathe together. Thank you, Frances. I'm glad you could be here. Wow. Stephen, go ahead.
Just had a question about the kind of outer architecture that you were inspired by, because if there's a sense of reciprocity between the outer architecture and the inner architecture, what kind of architecture feeds your soul?
Great question. Thank you. I really appreciate that because it reminded me of something that I was thinking about during Melissa's talk. And I was reminded of Johanni Palazmi, who's an architect and philosopher who spoke about architecture as the third skin. The third skin. So Melissa shared with us about our second skin, the way that clothing and fashion is a kind of second skin. And so if we look at our first skin, we don't see any right angles. There are no right angles on this body, all curves. And I'm inspired by organic architecture because it's a more kind third skin to ourselves. When we have curves and we have gentle angles that are holding us. One of our friends mentioned that their architecture made them feel embraced, that their space was embracing them. I'm inspired by architecture that responds to the human form and reminds us of this embrace of something much bigger than ourselves, makes us feel held. And I can share an image from a building that I designed, which embodies this, because many of us are visual. So this space has one right angle in it, and you're looking at it there next to the door. And not only does the form of the space evoke this organic geometry, sacred geometry, it also uses materials which speak to life. So the columns and beams are wood, they're foraged timbers that were branches from trees on a local coffee farm here in Costa Rica where we built this temple. And the roof is bamboo, and it's actually in a geometry known as a reciprocal structure. So it actually speaks to the nature of reciprocity. And before we had books, we had churches, and the walls and structures of churches educated us centuries ago and spoke to us about the nature of the universe and life. And so I'm inspired by architecture which reconnects us with a sense of life. And shows us what's possible as far as the infinity, the union of our humanity and our divinity. Let's see if I have more photos in this slideshow. Yeah, so this temple is actually built by the land. As architect, my role was to get out of the way and allow her to channel a vision through me of what could be sustained on the land. And so I asked for permission from the local indigenous tribe to construct this building. They don't own the land, but they have been the spiritual stewards and guardians of the land for centuries. And so they said yes and gave me the suggestion to place beneath the floor of the building a symbol of birth, a symbol of life, and a symbol of death, to imbue the space with the power of the oneness. So there are seeds, grass, and a bone here beneath the floor of this temple. And the roof is held up by this circle, which represents the sacred hoop of life that humans are meant to weave and tend and be a part of. And in our times, we're meant to mend the sacred hoop of life, which is what the ancestors would say. So this is the space. And that tree, which is at the center of the stage, which is shaped like a crescent moon, actually bloomed the day we finished the construction. So I felt the nature of the place speaking back, saying, yes, this is good and right and true. Thanks for asking your question. Yeah.
Thank you, Veronica. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your wisdom. It was a beautiful class. And I just invite everyone to unmute for a couple of seconds and say thank you to Veronica, please.
Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you, Veronica. It's really beautiful.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will share again Veronica's class information and her link and link to her website on the chat so that everybody can have it.
Thank you, Maka. And I have a special gift. It's a happy map. So the link is in the chat if you want to download that guide to support you in creating inner architecture. I would be happy to offer that. And thanks so much, Maka, for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And before